Welcome to the Spark Good podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration, strategies, and stories that will ignite your passion for making a difference through your business. I'm your host, Stephanie Malon-Rufi, and together we will dive into the world of entrepreneurship and small business and explore how we can harness its power to spark good and change how we do business. I believe in the incredible potential that business can have in making a positive social impact, and I want to help you discover how you can better align your business goals with meaningful causes and contribute to a better world. Plus, you'll learn how to nurture your own well-being, change traditional rules that might be holding you back, and thrive in your role as a social business owner. All right, let's dive in. Hello, thank you so much for joining me again today on the Spark Good podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Malon-Rufi, and I am really excited for this week's topic, which is all about transparency and how greater transparency in your business actually not only is it good for business, but it really can increase the impact that you're having with your business and helps us move to a more human-centered business. And, I've been talking in some of my early episodes about these traditional business practices that don't really serve us as business owners and really as a world. And so as we're moving our conversation away from, well, this is the way that business works, those traditional practices, and we're going to be embracing a more human-centered way of doing business, embedding more social impact into our work, transparency is such an important part of that conversation. So today I'm going to talk about the way transparency is not valued in some of these traditional business models, the values that it can bring to your work when you embrace transparency. And then I'm going to give you 5 ways that you can increase transparency in your own business. Some of these, if not all of them, you can start right away, and they actually are not going to cost you extra money. You're going to see there's a way you can start implementing them if you haven't already, or maybe go deeper with them. But before we get to those, which I know people love, those tangible action lists, I want to back up here and kind of set the context. Traditional business practices historically do not prioritize transparency. That's not saying all of them, but I'm saying generally speaking, that is not a high value. And there's some reasons for that. So first, one of the reasons is this competitive advantage, okay? Traditional business models, which, competitive advantage is a big buzzword when you look at some of these businesses. It often involves keeping certain information, maybe pricing strategies, supplier relationships, keeping that confidential. That's a big part of their competitive advantage. And there's a belief that revealing too much might make them vulnerable to competitors. Okay. So that driving force of having a competitive advantage, a lot of times sort of mystery and secrets to a certain extent are a part of that. Transparency often is not. Another reason is down to the money and especially profit. So some traditional businesses rely on certain tactics to maximize their profit margin. So some of these might be opaque pricing, right? When it's not very clear, hidden fees, or just really complex pricing structures that kind of leave you confused. So some of engaging in some of these practices can be financially advantageous for these businesses, although it lacks transparency. Another reason to not embrace transparency would be it limits your external accountability. So this is definitely changing, and we have seen this over several decades, and especially in the past few years, where businesses are now having a lot more external attention and even scrutiny on them about some of their practices, right? And of course, the more transparent you are, the more people know like what actually is happening and can hold you more accountable. So by not having, by keeping information inaccessible, while people might be able to guess or make assumptions, when people don't actually know maybe what is happening, there's mystery there and not transparency, then it's harder, right, for them to be specific and for the business to have some accountability. And when I talk about accountability, external accountability, that can be to a variety of people. I mean, that can be to suppliers, partners, vendors, customers, clients, even investors, and then also just the general public. All right, another way that many traditional businesses are structured they have a hierarchical organizational structure. So that's where decision making is really concentrated at the top. And when this happens, there's a very much a limited flow of information that is sort of passed even throughout the organization. And there's a lot of discouragement about having that open communication. And again, this is from more of a hierarchical structure of business. And actually, this, I think, is a topic I'm planning another episode on because, well, if it's not hierarchical, what could that be? And there's actually a lot of different ways we can organize our business even as we grow. And so I think we'll get into that in another episode. But that hierarchical structure lends itself to not being transparent. And lastly, another area here is that in some industries, there's a lack of regulation or minimal regulatory pressure to be transparent about certain practices, right? So that's where, and regulation tends to come within industries, and that tends to come maybe from a government entity. But when there's less regulation, also leads to being less transparent. And there's no consequences, right, when you're less regulated. So regulation can also play a role in how transparent a business is or is not. All right. Now, let's move to talking about why transparency is actually really important value for businesses, social impact businesses, to have. So first of all, maybe this might be obvious, but that trust and credibility, right? Transparency builds trust. It's going to build trust with your clients, your customers, employees, other stakeholders. In a social impact business where the primary mission is to create that positive social or environmental change, trust is really essential. And people need to believe and see that your business is genuinely committed to that stated mission. Another reason is accountability, which, right, we just heard about how there's less accountability when you're not as transparent, right? So transparency actually holds the business accountable for more of its work. Another category is that measurement of impact. So transparency is really important for measuring and even reporting on the social or environmental impact that your business is having, and really helps you to demonstrate the effectiveness of your initiatives that you are taking, and helps you even make data-driven decisions for improvement. That's super important, which also leads to the next one, which is that greater transparency helps you to avoid this disconnect between the work that you're doing and then that you want to do and the mission you want to fulfill and maybe what's actually happening. This is something, if you've heard the term greenwashing, okay, that is, as traditional businesses and corporations were adopting environmental practices, or at least talking more about better environmental practices, some companies did put more effort in their communication and talking about it and not actually doing it and making internal changes. And that is what led to this term of greenwashing. So you're actually making some misleading claims about the impact you're having. However, when we're more transparent, that's going to help to avoid this, because you're going to be better aligned, your actions and your messaging. Lastly, and this also is a super important point, is that transparency encourages a culture of learning and continuous improvement. Okay, when you're transparent within your business, even if it's just with yourself, right? That means that you're going to be more open about successes and even, and I'm going to put this in quotes, failures. And you can learn from both of those experiences and adapt your strategies to be more effective. Okay. So, and this is something that actually this failures piece is that when I work with clients or I facilitate some small groups of business owners, and we talk a lot about mindset and everything that flows from that. But failure can be a big stumbling block for everyone, but especially for business owners, right? And the more we can redefine failure, embrace failure, then the quicker we can move past it and see what we learn from it. In fact, I think it's maybe a 60-second video. It's super short. Maybe it's 2 minutes, of Sarah Blakely, who is the inventor, founder of the company Spanx. And she talks about redefining failure and talks about actually how she grew up in a household where failure was celebrated, where the question was, what went wrong today? What did you fail at today? And really by doing that this was a lesson from her dad, and that one of his big things that he did with his kids, because the quicker you're more comfortable with this idea of quote unquote failure, the easier it is for you to accept it when it happens, move on, and learn from it. And so when we go back to transparency, when we're developing a business that's creating a culture of learning and improvement, where if something doesn't go well, we're not hiding it, right? Because a lot of times we hide that we're afraid of punishment. We're bringing that out in the open. And that is just so much healthier for your business. And also when we think about having more of a human-centered business, right? So, okay, hopefully that gave you a sense of, wow, there's some really great benefits when we start to embrace transparency, live in transparency, embed it in our business. All right, I am now at the point where I will share 5. There's more than this, but I've selected what I think are 5 really great areas that you can increase transparency in your business. And they're tangible. They're things that you can, am I doing this or not? Look today. How do these 5 areas play into your business? Is there something, maybe there's something to do differently, or maybe it's confirming or affirming, I feel like I have these working well in my business. And if you do, awesome. Okay, I'm going to go through them. So the first one is around pricing. Okay, transparency in pricing. I cannot stress this enough. I think this is so vital that we create businesses that are more transparent with pricing. So one is, do you have clear pricing? Is it easy for people to figure out your pricing? Okay, now I recognize that some businesses are, especially when you get into more of a consulting, or there are certain types of businesses that they have to customize maybe what they're bringing forward. They're customizing their proposal or their offer. However, there is still a way that you can signal what your pricing is initially, right? It could, consulting packages under this topic range from $5,000 to $10,000 total, or something, something like that. There's a way that you can at least indicate something around your pricing. And along those lines, then how hard is it for somebody to even access some of that pricing information, right? And along those lines, this idea of no hidden fees. Okay. Hidden fees, unexpected charges. Okay. So hidden fees and unexpected charges. This comes up a lot. I'm seeing this actually a lot right now in the restaurant industry, at least in the Twin Cities, and that's where I'm located, but where there's within the city of St. Paul, you're able to have this wellness charge, but it's not considered a tip, and then of course there's tax on your final bill. So I recently was at lunch with some friends and ordering items off the menu. Now I will say very small. At the bottom it says, there's a 4% or whatever it is, wellness charge added to all bills. Very small at the bottom. Of course, I've been eating out in St. Paul enough to know that some places have this. Well, and then we're ordering, and then our lovely server was suggesting a different way. We were ordering a salad, number of us were. Why don't you, instead of the bread being mixed in, get the bread on the side? Okay, that sounds great, all this. Well, the bill comes. First of all, it is not a physical bill that you can sit and look at. Rather, it is on a very small screen. It's on a device that's going to take your credit card right at the table that the server is holding for you. So now you're in a high pressured, situation. You're looking at this tiny screen, and ultimately, there was an additional charge for this suggestive way for the bread to be on the side of this order. There was this wellness charge. The drink I had was not the price that was on the menu that I ordered from. And so you could see how this all of a sudden, this $22 lunch, of which, and then you're paying tip on top of that, is now $40. And it just doesn't feel great. And I realize I'm talking about a small amount of money here, but this kind of thing can escalate, and this sort of thing just doesn't feel good to me. And it makes me think twice about going back again. It makes me think a little bit differently versus, and I will say, I'm going to contrast this to another restaurant also in the city, and at the bottom of their menu, it says, tipping is not expected at this restaurant. Menu prices support premium ingredient sourcing, $16 to $25 an hour wages, paid time off, health, dental, vision insurance for full-time staff, and 401k with 4% company match. Boom. When I go to this restaurant, I know that the prices encompass all these other things. It's very clear. And when I get the bill, the only thing that's been added is the tax, which of course, is added to any restaurant bill. So I bring this up because while these lunches might have ended up being the same price, I felt better knowing up front, this is super clear. I know this pricing includes, it's very transparent what the pricing includes and what I can expect. So I realized that was a bit of a tangent, but I hope that gives you some ideas of pricing these other fees and surcharges, and what does that mean? How do you explain your prices? What's included in those? And how can your client or customers come away from those experiences feeling really good, right? Okay, I'm going to move on from pricing. The next one is communications, right? Information access. So this can be when maybe you have team members, employees, or your customers and clients. Maybe you even have investors, maybe you have partners or collaborators. Making sure that you are providing some regular updates. I don't mean you need to be sending something every week, but do you have a cadence to how you connect with them in a way that so they kind of know what's happening, what's going on? Along those lines, what is the access to information? Is there essential information that is easy for people to find? Okay. So thinking about how well you are able to communicate and let people know the relevant information that they need to know. It's not hard to find. And because when you can't find information, or when you're not hearing, right, when you're not hearing from someone and months are going on, you're kind of wondering what's happening. And there's more mystery, less transparency, which also can lead to creating some false assumptions or ideas that really aren't happening. But again, really think about, who do you need to communicate with? What cadence works well? And is there other certain information that needs to be accessible for people? For example, if you have a business that requires maybe ongoing signups, right? People are taking classes, weekly classes with you, and how easy or hard for them is it to sign up for that class all the time? Okay. That's sort of the information that's really helpful to know. Do they know what the schedule is in advance? How far in advance? Okay. So that's an example of information access. Like, how can you be more transparent and open about that? All right. The third one is engaging in honest or ethical advertising and promotion. And there's really within this, there's two things that I'm thinking of. And one is just truthful advertising, right? Promoting, so that your marketing, your advertising, your promotion campaigns are really accurately representing what it is that you're offering. So you don't want misleading claims, over exaggeration, but just to be really honest. So again, I think this is something that has shifted. However, not totally. Still, there's still businesses out there engaging in what is maybe not the most truthful, or I would say over-exaggerated claims. Along those lines, when we talk about advertising and promotion, so that's really at the kind of top of your sales process, the beginning of it. And think about, how does that lead in? What is your sales process and how pressured is it? Okay, because a high pressured sales process, which tends to be most often pressured by time. Well, you only have till midnight tonight. Do you want it or not? Do you want it or not? Okay. Now, we all need timelines and we have to have deadlines. Absolutely. But when you do a rush job, a high pressured situation, it doesn't really feel good from the customer perspective. Either they're going to not want that, or they might do it and have buyer's remorse, and it's not a great way to go into working with someone. Going back to my example at the restaurant, when you have the server there that's like, here, pay your bill on this little screen and put that's a high pressured situation that doesn't feel good. So really think about that. When you think about how you promote, you advertise, how you're bringing people into that, what that sales process looks like for you. All right. Number 4, supply chain transparency. Now, supply chain, that not everyone has a supply chain. So I open this up and say, whether suppliers, vendors, right? I mean, our businesses spend money, and where are you spending that money? And especially if we're, in more of a product-based world, that where are you sourcing your materials? There are a lot of questions around that. And again, this is an area that I do think has really opened up the past few years, if not several decades, of, big corporations and what does their supply chain look like? They often have what's called a global supply chain. And what does that mean? Because a lot of, as we know, many corporations and large businesses really squeeze their supply chain. Walmart, very well known for this. People, oh, this is so exciting to be in Walmart because that's a big hit because they have so many stores. On the other hand, they have so many stores, they have the upper hand in that decision making. There aren't a lot of vendors that are making a ton of money through their products being sold at Walmart, for example. Again, that's a loose example, but you need to start thinking about where you're even sourcing some of your materials, or if maybe you're going to contract with a business for your accounting and bookkeeping or your taxes, right? Or your graphic design. So think about those choices, make intentional choices, and also be transparent about that. Okay, the last one, number 5. The culture of feedback and engagement. So fostering this within your business, both with employees, with clients and customers, moves you towards greater transparency. And remember, sometimes you need to be specific. Like, what is the information? Like, what kind of feedback are you looking for? The more specific questions can lead to better information for you. But making sure that you're always asking, that you want that feedback, that you're open to what it is people have to share, right? Again, this is moving to a more human-centered business. You want to hear from these other humans because we do business with humans. We don't do business with machines. A business, there's a human in there, right? So get that information. Ask for the feedback. Engage. Because the more you do that, the more you're going to also increase the satisfaction of people who are engaged with you in your business. And it actually helps you to have better offers. So this is where this actually is going to make you have a better business. Because when we get into the practice of having an offer, getting feedback, refining the offer, putting it out again, getting feedback, right? We're getting in that what's called the feedback loop. It's better for our business and better for our offers. So creating that culture of feedback engagement is really key. Whew. Okay. I hope that this gave you some new ideas. Maybe it was inspiring. Perhaps there's maybe there's one thing you want to go check out. How am I doing this, right? One of these areas. So just to recap, the 5 areas that I talked about where you can increase transparency in your business or maybe check in with your business is pricing, clear pricing, not having hidden fees, right? That whole process of people understanding your pricing. 2, communications and information access. 3, honest or ethical advertising and promotion. As that sales process begins, what does that look like? 4, transparency about your vendors and suppliers. 5, creating a culture of feedback and engagement. Great. Now, I would love any feedback that you have or ideas that you have, or what is one thing that you are doing really well in your business, or what's one area that you want to increase your transparency. Please feel free to share that information with me. And if you want to think about other ways to look at the social impact of your business, right? We talked about just one little piece, which is transparency. There's so many other areas to get into. I invite you to also check out my quiz. It's called, Is Your Business Impacting Social Change? I'll put a link in the show notes, and you can also go to my website. But taking that quiz allows you to also get some other ideas and also let you know, like, hey, I'm doing pretty good here. Or, oh, this is an area maybe I can work somewhere on. So it's a free quiz. Please go ahead and take it. And again, link in the show notes, or please visit my website, www.sparkgood.net. All right. And with that, I thank you so much for listening. Thank you for engaging. It's been wonderful to hear from some people who have started listening to the podcast. And I wish you a wonderful week. Until next time.